We are back here with the transfer portal tracker. Ben Spicer joined by a new face today, Warchant's own Michael Langston. Michael, busy time of year. Things starting to ramp up and intensify in the transfer portal for Florida State. Visitors already on campus. The major one, the one that everyone wants to hear about, of course, is quarterback Thomas Castellanos. What can you tell us about that visit? How has it gone? I think it's still ongoing as we record this, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, it's still going. I know Matt's out there, waiting to catch up with him after it completes. As long as everything checks off as far as the visit, I think there's a good chance you'll see him in this class. I think FSU has positioned themselves pretty well, and this is a kid that I've known pretty well for a while. I covered him a lot out of high school when he played at Ware County, ironically the Ware County Gators. I know a lot about just his game, the explosibility he brings. But I think overall in this visit, he got there this morning. I actually arrived last night. Then, as we first reported on Warchant about him being on in Tallahassee, and then today started the visit this morning. And I think overall, as long as everything checks out like I expect it to, and I haven't heard anything to kind of differ from that, I think you'll probably see him, in this class.
Both new coordinators had their introductory press conference today. Gus Malzahn coming over from UCF and Tony White coming from Nebraska. The assumption out there is that several players from both of those schools will likely be joining Florida State. Have you heard any headway in terms of that? And what's the latest on those Nebraska and UCF pipelines with the new coaches coming in?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of action. I think a lot of the action will come, probably either over the weekend or, probably the most stuff we'll see is when we hit next week. You'll see some of the Nebraska kids coming in. I think the two notable ones that I'm really locked in on is James Williams, edge guy, and then also Jamari Butler is another one that I've heard very tied into FSU. I think there's a good chance for FSU to pull both of those guys, but we'll see certainly how that goes. Another one that's intriguing to me is Caden Kittler. That's one that they just offered. I believe last night or recently. He's a center prospect. We know they need a center. I think that's a guy that FSU fans should probably get pretty familiar with, just because I think that's probably the guy that I've heard the most targets about, as far as wanting him and covering him as a target, and certainly their offer kind of speaks to that. So he's going to visit, I think, late December. Probably going to be one of his last visits. I think FSU is likely to get some potential good news there. I think another UCF guy is Marcellus Marshall, offensive tackle that they really like a lot. Certainly has a lot of ties to both Herb Hand and Gus Malzahn. I think that's one where you have a lot of these UCF and Nebraska. You have to like FSU chances as long as you're seeing visits. One more intriguing one that's kind of popped on the radar probably in the last 3 days is tight end Terrence Carter out of Louisiana. Very productive tight end, over 700 yards receiving, very explosive, can add a lot to that passing game when you're running. I think the main thing with this offense, you're going to see a lot of running, but I think the tight end is a big part of what they do as far as explosive plays, and I think certainly it feels like Terrence fits that. I do expect a visit. I don't have a set date for that visit, but certainly I feel like it's going to be in the month of December. I think some of those are a few of the guys, and then offensive tackle Derek Simmons out of Western Carolina. That's the one that's probably the first guy that I'd heard from the portal that they were really targeting, and I think he's supposed to visit this weekend. So that's one we'll certainly be keeping an eye on. So at the receiver position, we're going to see a lot of activity with FSU. They're after a pair of Miami, Ohio receivers that are very productive, going to bring a lot to separation, getting separation on the field, big play guys. I think certainly they would both add a lot to the table. That's Javon Tracy and Reggie Virgil. I know there's kind of conflicting stuff on Virgil. I've heard that he is expected to still visit FSU. That hasn't been finalized, the visit, but I do expect that likely happening in Javon Tracy. Definitely, that's another one. I do think both of those kids they'll eventually get on campus, but I think those are some of the names that certainly jump out to me right now, Ben. But there's more on there. Matt's done an incredible job with the really graphic list. I think that's the one that it's kind of my go-to when I go to it and look at it. If a guy's not added on there, I think Matt's done a great job of kind of updating the status where they're at, whether they're currently visiting or they're getting ready to visit or they've been offered or if there's mutual interest. I think that's a really good gauge for people. I don't think you're going to find that pretty much anywhere that you find every guy that they're involved with. I think another guy that hasn't really I've talked about that much is out of Jacksonville Bulls defensive lineman Jack Pyburn, played at Florida. That's the one that I've heard that when he does enter the portal, I think FSU will be a factor. I think a lot of people, when he left, thought it was more about NIL and money and funds. I think it's more about PT playing time and what place fits him the best. And I think certainly with the departures of Marvin Jones Jr., departures of other guys that we've seen on the defensive line, that's a guy to keep an eye on. I know he went to Florida and I know he grew up a Florida fan, but I think that's one where I went through his recruitment the first time where he eventually chose Florida. But I think this is one where, to certainly keep an eye on. I do think there's certainly a possibility you'll see FSU get a visit. Nothing set in stone or for sure, but that's certainly a name that's hot on my radar. And then the other one that's intriguing to me is offensive lineman Joshua Braun, who his dad coached at Lincoln. He was an offensive line coach at Lincoln. He's lived a lot of his life in Tallahassee. I think he was in Live Oak as well. But there's a lot of different connections to FSU. Certainly a productive offensive lineman. I think that would help you in the inside, and a guy that certainly has ties to Tallahassee. You're not going to have to spend a lot of time selling the school what they are. I think he knows exactly what they are. They recruited him multiple times. That's one that you could certainly keep an eye on, because we know, I think mainly when you look at this this transfer portal class, and I think Gus and Tony both kind of address that some, that they're going to hit it hard on the portal, and I think a lot of the focus will be on the offense line, but I think the edge will be something that you hear a lot, and then probably a position that we haven't talked about as much as the linebacker position. I think that's a place as well that I see them. They do have some young guys that are pretty talented, like Blake Nicholson, but I think there's going to be more that you want to get more experience in there that can help them, and it's kind of be a difference for people to adjust to of the way Tony White uses linebackers, where it's a vital part of his defense. And so I think certainly that's a position we could see them coveting and addressing as this portal crazy season goes on, since it's going to be a long one in the month of December and into January. I think you're going to see a lot of activity, and certainly I've kind of highlighted some of the ones that are going on, but I do think the most focus is going to be certainly getting the quarterback position done, and potentially that's likely to possibly get done soon. And we'll see if they try to go add another if they do that, but I'll check on that and we'll see. But I think overall offensive line, quarterback, and then I do think you need a few experienced playmakers at receiver, because we just don't know who's for sure coming back. So those are two off the hoof that really just jump out to me as far as positions.
Things fluctuate and change so rapidly this time of
Yeah.
the year. That's why the Premium Recruiting Board and the Tribal Council are so important. You can get real-time updates from Michael, Matt, and the rest of the Warchant staff. So make sure you head over and go and do that. Sign up if you haven't already. And before we close out, I just kind of want to get an idea of, the timeline, what things kind of look like week by week and then day by day, because, you've got Thomas Castellanos on campus visiting now. You mentioned there's visits upcoming this weekend. Is it like, in the season or in the off season when you typically have recruits just coming on the weekend? Obviously they're in high school, or kind of how does that work? Do people come in every day with the portal? I know it's a little different. So just kind of give us a little inside behind the curtain there.
Yeah, it's going to be weird when we get to the month of January, because you're talking about when you hit January, you're going to get a combination of maybe junior days and even portal visits, and so it's kind of an overlap thing, but I think overall it doesn't change kind of their plan. I don't think there's like I think timeline. A lot of these I guess portal guys, I think they would like to get it done by late December, but a lot of it's like there's not a exact timeline. It really just depends on the kid. Like for instance with Thomas, I think that's going to go pretty swiftly. I think that one won't take a long time. More than likely, I think a few of the offensive linemen probably won't take a long time. Kind of addressed this with Tom when I was on the Smash the other night, where if there's connections to the player, it usually doesn't take that long because of the familiarity with everything they're doing. And then just really it just speeds up the process when you have somebody that you're kind of close with. And then it's mainly just selling, the program if they haven't been there before. But that's a pretty quick thing. So I think the main thing to pay attention to is just the connection, the previous ties that they have to the coach and even the school. I think those tend to go faster. Other ones are more you have to sell and pitch it and then be around the players since they probably haven't done that, before. Because some of these kids are taking visits to FSU that haven't been there before. So being around the players a little more and being around these coaches from a personal standpoint, I think is something that kids that haven't been there have to experience. So I think the timeline just differs, but I think a lot of these recruits, most of them, would like to get it done. In say when they start taking visits, I think they would like to get it done in a 2 or 3 week pattern and plan. But really, it just depends on just who's visiting what and the connections and the ties and just their comfort level with that school. But overall, um, we'll see. I guess it just differs with some, but I think overall you'll start seeing some activities with commitments and stuff like that when we hit the mid January or mid December time around Christmas, ironically, and just you'll start seeing them start flowing in. And like I said, I still think this is going to be probably the biggest portal class they've had, and certainly that's not surprising when you consider the guys that have hit the portal. Usually when you hit that many, you're going to see a lot where you get a lot more back. I'm not going to say exact number, but I'm surprising it's like 15, 16, something like that. It wouldn't surprise me if it got that large, but I think overall it just depends on what they hit on, because there might be that I've seen certain situations where maybe they wanted to take one or two, but then they get the one that's the highest on the board, and then maybe they're like, you know what, we feel pretty good about this position, so they might just it's fluid about how many they take at certain spots. But I think overall this is just the beginning, and it's going to ramp up a lot when we hit next week, where I think late December is kind of the place I've seen where you're going to see a some big visit weekends for FSU, since there's a lot to cover, there's a lot to do, and I think Tony White covered it today. He's like, he's ready to get to work, and there's a lot of work to do. And I agree with him. But there's still time where you have time to talk to kids that are, you know, haven't entered the portal, or that maybe they might be thinking about it. That's something where he has a chance to meet with them. Same thing with Gus. I think it was very entertaining. Just listen to their thoughts of how they do that. Even I love the question of Gus about the did you know their signs? That was pretty kind of a light humor moment as far as assess that. But I think it's good from a personal standpoint for people to get to know kind of
Right.
what their principles are, what these coaches want, and kind of want to establish. And it kind of it gets you more kind of familiar of, it's like with offense, it's pretty clear. Like when you look at the quarterbacks that FSU has on the roster, and you look at the quarterback in Castellanos and even Kevin Sperry, it's going to be a guy that they feel comfortable with. Hey, if we need to run the ball with our quarterback, we want a guy that we can feel comfortable with. So they're certainly going to run the ball. There's a dedication to it. I will tell people, because people have asked me a lot about these hires. Pretty impressed with everything I've seen so far. But the guy that I've heard kind of more buzz lately is about the Herb Hand, the newest offensive line coach that's hired. Heard through a lot of different multiple outlets that I talk to, or multiple people I talk to that are connected with. They've either covered him or people that are involved that they've, as a coaching standpoint, they've given him some pretty high praise, that they feel like he's going to do a solid job, that he's a solid offensive line coach. They feel really good about what he does player development wise. I know that's a guy that doesn't get as much burn as the other guys like the coordinators, but he's a name I've heard, a positive stuff. Certainly, in the last 24, 48 hours of just his ability to how he connects with players. And so I know everyone hasn't got a chance to meet him yet. And certainly I think they want to hire a wide receivers coach as well. But I think offensive line coach, I wanted to kind of throw that little note in there of what I'm hearing of people that have experience with a guy like Herb Hand, who has experience all over the country. And I wanted to throw that in there, and stuff I've heard with that. So, and that's certainly encouraging news when you consider I think that's one of the biggest units and most important units for what FSU wants to do.
Right.
Seems to be wherever he's gone, They run the ball really well. Their rushing attacks are really good. So I think that was kind of my takeaway from the presser today was they're going to really run the ball. Like that's going to be a focal point of what they do, and maybe maybe that turns kids off or recruits off in some places as far as quarterbacks of more quarterbacks want to pass the ball, but overall this system they run and they want to do, and it's a change, but it's also exciting time to just see how they could put all this together.
It'll be fun to monitor the portal pursuits of FSU over these next couple weeks. Again, make sure you head over to warchant.com. We'll also have coverage here on Warchant TV. So like this video on your way out, hit the subscribe button. Hit the subscribe button. There, I got it out that time. Turn your notifications on. That way you're alerted as soon as we post these videos because you don't want to miss out on all the news that's coming your way here over these next couple weeks. For Michael Langston, I'm Ben Spicer. Thanks for joining us here, and we'll see you back next time on Warchant TV.